That's me on the screen now. We got it. Okay. So at any rate, my daughter encouraged me. And the forum is really kind of into a lot of different things. It's everything from topical conversations about where the fish are in certain parts of the country, to the conservationist issues, to just a general discussion about what kind of reels do you like or not like and why, and so on. And if you want to go down that path, we're certainly well capable of doing that over the course of the time permitted. So just for a moment on that logo there, I'm the old guy and there's a young guy or gal, we're not quite sure which. That's either a sunrise or a sunset. They both got directions, and both we don't know which one's going and which one's coming, but it's all about just kind of passing on what we all come to love, the idea of fishing and kind of making it a generational thing. The idea behind us is repair, refurbish, resell. I don't think I've met an angler out there that isn't concerned in some regard about conservation, about the state of our waters, about protecting it and passing it on to future generations. And well, keeping your tackle running and not throwing it away, making it part of a disposable heritage, I guess, that's out there today. It's just one little way that I feel I can contribute to that. So we'll talk today about the care of reels. And again, jump in anytime if you have any questions. And then I'll show you a little bit, if you're interested in repair, I'll show you a little bit about some of the hints and techniques and some of the things I do in terms of repair that have served me well over time. And you can take it or leave it or do what you like with it. Dick, you want to move? We're ready to go again?
Yep.
Okay, so just some things obvious, some things maybe not obvious, but sounds like everybody's still actively out there fishing, which is wonderful. But it'll come a time when either the season will close or it just won't be comfortable enough to keep on fishing. And that's the time where you start to look at getting prepped for next season, but taking care of a lot of the issues that may have been accumulating over the course of this season. So it's why you service your rod and reel now. It sounds like most of the folks in this group are saltwater anglers. And from experience, what I've found is there's an awful lot of hidden damage and wear that occurs on fishing reels. It's not typically visible. Most of you will know when you park your truck or your car along the beach, you go out surf fishing for the day, you come back, you see that little film on your windshield. Well, that film is micro sands and micro salts, and they accumulate in the reel. And regardless of how well sealed the manufacturer will tell you that a reel is, it's almost impossible to stop the intrusion of those micro sands and salts, no less if you're sitting and waiting in the surf and you dunk a reel or that, right? So it's always a good practice to get rid of those salts and debris on a regular basis. And if you can, or if you can't, maybe you're fishing it daily, we'll give you some tips for at least minimizing that issue. But one of the things you want to do is take the time now to do a thorough cleaning on the reel. You'll have the time, right? There's going to be a time when it's going to be for you to store the reels or put them away, or at least get them ready to ship to Florida or whatever it may be that you're going to do with them. But you'll have the time. It's convenient and it's timely during the winter season. And the fall is the best part. You're going to remember things now that you might forget when the spring comes. The runs start, and all of a sudden you realize, gee, that noise that reel was making, I never really took the time to go and try and figure out what that was or to address it. The other thing is, if you've got a reel that's failing and it needs a part or it needs repairs, let's say drag washers, maybe your drag washers are slipping, you now have the time to go and order it and the time for receipt. A lot of these parts manufacturers kind of stock on a periodic basis, so it may take you a week or two or a month. I have a reel on my desk right now that's 6 weeks waiting for a little spring clip for a Shimano reel. I mean, it shouldn't be, but it happens. A lot of the reel manufacturers use distributors to move their parts out. If any of you need the names of those distributors, if you're working on a particular reel, I'll be happy to let you know that. But a lot of those distributors will stock the most common pieces and parts that go into a reel, but they won't stock the entire load. And they'll turn back to their manufacturers to get that oddball replacement part that you may be needing to get your thing running properly. So take that into consideration. If you got a reel that has failed or a reel that is about to fail, if you will, it's acting up, get it looked at sooner rather than later. And the fall is a good time for that. And do it before you forget. I run cycles in the repair business. Dick mentioned probably have 2,000 videos out there over 5 years. I think on a regular basis, I probably service 4 or 5 reels a day. That's a normal amount that I'm tolerable with. That's usually about 2 hours of work. And as I mentioned, I'm retired. So I take 4 or 5 reels a day. We'll just start to extrapolate the math on that thing. There's weeks where I'll do 40 or 50 reels. Do that over the course of a year and you're doing 2,000 reels. You start to see things in terms of cycles. I get a big cycle in the spring because everybody's getting ready for the put the boats back in the water, hit the opening days in the freshwater seasons, get out in the surf when you can finally start seeing some of the fish return. And I find out, well, the reel just wasn't working right. Can you get it for me for next Thursday? I want to make a trip, right? Well, you do your best, but that doesn't always necessarily happen. But if you do it now, you'll be ready. And we'll talk a little bit about that in a moment or two. You'll be ready for next season start. Dick, you want to just pop that to the next one there? All right. So let's talk a little bit about preventive maintenance. I'm assuming everybody does the preventive maintenance. Here's a schedule for you. On a regular basis, and I call regular basis annual, take the reel apart or have somebody take the reel apart for you. Again, as I mentioned, you have micro sands, micro salts, and other things. You can't see it externally, but it's there. And as much as you clean the exterior of your reel, there's things that are hiding. If you have a level line reel with a pawl, the salts accumulate in that little pawl cap that allows your pawl to turn, right? It holds it into the worm gear. If you have the spinning reels with the top drags, water gets under that drag cap. Some of the more modern reels, they're starting to put some rubber gaskets in there to try to prevent that. But just think about how a spinning reel works. It's got the line coming down through the guides and onto the spool. Well, when it's winding on the spool, that line is wet. And where's the first place that the water is going? It's going to that adjuster button and the top of the spool. And that water then goes down through your drag set and it goes either, if it's a shielded system, it's going to go outside the rotor ball. If it's not, it's going to go into the rotor cup and it's going to get into your reel that way. Well, no matter how well you clean your reel after your trips, it's going to be in there. You need to really take it apart to get there. Lubrication is important. I show a couple of those in the picture here. There's some specialty lubrications. You'll see Cal's Universal Drag Grease. That's a Quantum product, I think, or a Kuma product. But that's for drag greases and for reel repair. Penn makes a nice one. It makes the oil and grease. It makes it in a 1 ounce and 2 ounce container as a convenient pack. You can pick that stuff up at Amazon. I think it's $10 or $11 for the combination set. And yes, you can use Penn oil and grease on a Shimano reel or a Shakespeare reel or whatever reel you're working on. But it's important to realize that lubrications, just like the lubrications in the engines of your car, they're going to dissipate. They're going to break down in viscosity. They're going to evaporate. And eventually the reel's going to wind up dry. And that's going to have an effect on 2 things. First thing is it's going to cause abnormal gear wear because they're not being lubricated. It's going to give you a louder noise, and it's going to affect the bearings if they're not sealed bearings. And most of the fishing reel bearings today are not sealed bearings. They're open bearings. And if you run them dry, all of a sudden, not only are they going to make noise, but they're going to go out of round or wear or rust or whatever the end result is. that just a couple of drops of oil will take care of. So you need to do that. The drag and the bearing cleaning and lubrication is very important. We talked about how the water intrusion gets in there, a little bit of a way to prevent that. But if I want to say that there's one thing that's most overlooked out of everything on a spinning reel, it's the top drags. And it's so easy to do. You pull the spool off by removing that adjuster knob. There's a little ring clip in there that gets removed. And then there's usually a 6 stack of washers. There's 3 fabric or Teflon or felt washers, depending on the manufacturer. There's 3 metal washers. You can generally get those out with a little, well, I use an awl, but any kind of a pick or just turning the spool upside down and kind of giving it a sharp wrap on the table. Generally will bring those washers out. And it's real easy to clean, and it'll keep your reel running without a skip or a drag or no adjustment at all. And I was to say that there's one thing that comes into my shop repeatedly. It's that the drags get worn or they get frozen onto those metals because somebody didn't do a relatively simple exercise. And then, of course, when you're doing this on an annual basis, you check for the worn or the damaged parts. Noise is not usually the number one key in terms of what's going on with the reel. Sort of just comparing it again to an automobile. If you hear something in an automobile that you haven't heard before, chances are something is talking to you about a need to be repaired or re-greased or something. And it's the same in a fishing reel. If you start hearing something in your reel that you haven't heard before, give it more than a passing thought. Give it a moment to try and understand what it is and go from there. And after fishing, then, so that's on an annual basis. After fishing, cleaning, fresh water, dry spray lube, safe storage. What not to do? I've seen a lot of folks that will say, "Oh, I rinse my reel off, my rod and reel off after every trip, particularly the ones in salt." And I say, "Well, how do you do that?" He said, "Well, I take the reel off the rod, wonderful, put it in a bucket, throw in some Palmolive dish detergent and some water, let it soak overnight, and then hose it off." Don't do that. Right? Palmolive dish detergent is a degreaser. Right. So the water's going to get in there and it's going to take all the greases that you have out of the reel, particularly the open face or conventional reels. There's no way to seal those reels. There are better seals today on the more modern spinning reels, but you're not going to find seals on any kind of conventional reel because, well, the spool rides inside those 2 side plates, and there's a big gap in those spools, and water and the like is going to get in there. And then after cleaning, store it in a safe place. I can't tell you how many times rods come in, and I don't repair rods. Rods come in with broken tips because they slammed the trunk lid on the rod. But I just got one today. I think I put a video up the other day. Somebody dropped a beautiful Penn Spin Fisher 5 live liner, just dropped it, right? So you need to figure out a way to store these things, keep them safe, and keep them fishing. I think you can flip that. All right. So the cleaning of your rods and reels and salt. I showed you a couple of products on the last page. I particularly like the Penn rod and reel cleaner, and I don't get paid to endorse that. I just kind of like it. There's a couple of products out there that can help you to do that. And there's a couple of things, or what do we used to call them? I don't know, bush fixes or whatever, I guess. But there's a couple of ways that you can get rid of salts on your reels if that's a problem for you. And we'll assume you guys are avid reel enthusiasts and you don't have those problems. But let's say you go to a flea market and you find a nice old Penn reel, but it's got a lot of greening on it or corrosion on the posts or the like. So the easy ones for cleaning your rod, just the fresh water. Use a sponge or a kitchen scrubby if you need a little bit of abrasion. That'll get rid of most of it simply by flushing it. The idea of taking the reel off of your pole and putting it in a pail or a 5-gallon bucket or something, filling it with fresh water is wonderful. It will dissolve the salts. And after you do that, make sure you You dump the pail and then just give it another rinse off with your tap water. You'll be fine with that. The pen rod and reel cleaner is kind of like that old Certs commercial. It's a cleaner and a wax. It will help a little bit with UV damage. So if you've got a boat and you're running your poles off the boat, regardless of whether you're using that pole or not, you're going to find a lot of UV damage happening just because it's exposed to the sun all the time. It's going to dull the paints. It's going to, if you have pen reels like the Long Beach and that with the plastic or Bakelite side plates, it's just going to take whatever finishes off there. That pen rod and reel cleaner will help to reduce the UV, but it's sort of like the older plastics on automobile headlights when they first came out. They're just going to dull over time, and there's no real way to restore that. I showed another product in there. If you got heavy grease loads on there, there's a product out there called Purple Power. It's available in Walmart's and that. It does the job, but read the contents on anything that you're going to go use on fishing reels. That one has lye in it. So if you happen to be sensitive to lye, and I am, I don't use it any longer, but it does a nice job. There's a company out in the Midwest called Flitz, F-L-I-T-Z. They make pre-cleaners, polishers, ceramic polishes for general industry use. They work very well on fishing reels. So if you have chrome pieces on your reels, the pre-wash is actually, I think it's urea acid, if I remember. It's whatever, but it does the job, and it does it quickly. So you got to watch it. The first time I used that thing, I figured it was like any other cleaner. You spray it on, you walk away, get a cup of coffee, come back, and rinse it off. And that's not the way that product works. That product works like spray it on and rinse it off quickly. So find the product that works for you. The one that works for me a lot in terms of that is simply the fresh water. But back to Mama's pantry, if you will, a good thing to do if you've got corrosion on your reels is to use a mix of 50-50 of vinegar and water. The acid in the vinegar will also help to dissolve any salts that may have built up over time. You can do that on reels. You can also do it on the rod seats. If that's the ones that usually, if you have a metal rod seat and it's just sitting in your boat all the time, those the washers and the tightening nuts and the like tend to have a lot of issues in terms of working. Use that vinegar solution, hose it down with fresh water, and then use a penetrating oil like a WD-40 or a liquid wrench or something like that. It'll go a long way to keeping those things operable and pretty much never give you that trouble there. The worn or broken or pieces, repair or replace, I get these in all the time. Broken knobs on fishing reels, broken bails, and it just, why is the question? Why continue to fish those things? Just get them repaired or replaced and move on with it. We talked a little bit about the oils and greases. Fishing reels are machines, right? And at the end of the day, any fishing reel that you have is pretty simple in its technology. A big gear turns a little gear. It turns something to collect the line. It either turns the spool or it turns the rotor to put the line onto a fixed spool. Not that hard, right? But if you don't keep them oiled and you don't keep them lubricated, something is going to break down along the way. So I can't emphasize enough, just like you would oil and grease your car or other machinery, do the same thing with your fishing reels. Buy that 1 ounce combo pack. It's on Amazon for pen stuff. Put a drop here and a drop there, and you'd be surprised at the responsiveness of that reel. I got one that people pay me to fix their reel. They send me a reel in it. Their bail is not functioning right. The bail either isn't tripping or it's slow to move over, and they assume the worst. Oh, I got a broken spring, I got a broken trip lever, I got something like that. That reel gets fixed in about 4 minutes. It is a simple spray of penetrating oil on both sides of the bail seam, and if you have a trip lever underneath, it's the spray of the penetrating oil on that trip lever, and it brings it right back to where it was. Remember what I was saying about those micro sands and micro salts? One of the places you can't prevent it from gathering is on the two seams where the bail connects to a rotor on a spinning wheel. And that penetrating oil will flush that right out, and that will keep it going for a long time to come. And I think we talked a little bit about the drag washer and service, so we can move to the next one, Dick.
Okay. Whoops.
Well, let's take a moment here then. Well, go back one. The other way.
Oops, let's see. Yeah.
All right, well, now we're doing a preview while we're waiting. Right, Dick. One more. No, you're going the wrong way again. One more. All right. So this is kind of a recap then, right? Its
Okay.
best practices are to rinse the rod and reel off after every trip using the fresh water. Inspect your line. This one's important. These next three are pretty much important, particularly if you're using braid, right? Braid, everybody just jumps to the thought of braid is not going to break. And quite honestly, it isn't for the most part, but it will fray. If you're using braid on a rod that has metal eyelets, well, you get a 2-for-1. You get frayed braid and you get worn line guides. And if you're using braid on an older pole that just had the plastic inserts, check those line guides because it will run a groove in it. I've seen braid damage on some reels that just has absolutely surprised me. I've seen braid cut line guides. So on a spinning wheel, for example, where you have that valley on that bearing that's supposed to turn for your line guide, I've seen braid cut grooves in that. And of course, on those low profile bait casters, I guess for the salt side, it would be like a Dio Alexa or a Tranks, if you will, on Shimano. I've seen the interior on that line guide get ripped wide open by braid. So inspect those line guides and again, take appropriate action there. And then the rod wraps, what starts as one little twine quickly unravels. And the next thing you know, you've lost the line guide or bent it or broke it. So do that inspection on a regular basis. That's the best one. Hear noises, address them, don't ignore them. And then the delay is kind of what we're talking about here, wear and failure. And you don't want to lose the fish of a lifetime because of a reel failure. I work on a lot of fishing reels for boats. I actually started that way 25 years ago. It was kind of a swap thing or a bartering thing. I used to go out of the head boats out of Belmar and Point Pleasant. I kind of settled on Belmar. It was sort of easier for me to get to. And I met up with two captains there. And one day I was asking the captain, well, how do you fix your reels in the rental fleet? And he said, well, if you look downstairs, you're going to find a couple of buckets. All I do is accumulate them. And if I have time in the winter, I fix them. So I made a deal with him. I charged him a minimal amount for repair, and I got to ride free on his boats. And we can find that one of the things I always talked to him about was you need to do a better job of preventive maintenance. You don't want to lose the customer for life because he lost the fish of a lifetime when your tackle broke, right? So it's sort of like we'll hate Hertz and we'll hate Avis if we rent the car and it breaks down on the side of the road, right? So address your issues immediately. I think kind of common sense for most, but not necessarily everybody. Here's one that always works. I don't know if any of you have cabins or shore homes or anything like that, but there's a lot of folks that they'll have the homes in LBI or Seaside or Wildwood or wherever they go. They keep a couple of rods on hands for visitors, right? They always have their treasured rods that they're going to take out and take into the surf, but they'll always keep a rod or reel or two or three. And they're usually stored in the shed at the back of the house. And when somebody wants one, we'll grab it, take it fishing. It's probably usually, let's get back and let's have something to eat or go to the boardwalk or do whatever we do. Those generally do not get a lot of care. And if you want to be smart about it, the idea is to follow the same practice with the rods that you use occasionally as the same way you would your go-to rod that you're going to use on a regular basis. Doing the service at the beginning or end of the season is really up to you. I like to do it at the end of the season. That way I know that if I start early, the rod's ready to go. And so, the reels and the like. You can do it at the beginning of the season. Just give yourself plenty of time. The ideas we talked about on the periodically greasing and oiling. If you're using this thing heavy, if you're out there fishing 2 or 3 times a week, the annual maintenance, throw that out the door, right? You should be stripping that reel down at least twice a year, and maybe even more. If it's like I said, the head boats that I used to do them for, I still do a few of them, but those, they'll fish until they break. That's not necessarily a good idea. The charter boats that I do, however, they're the ones, the 6-passenger boats. They're usually going for tuna, going to the canyon and that. Every 2 or 3 months, I'll get them in, and it's just an inspection and a relube and a regrease. And again, I guess the stakes are a little bit higher with the folks that are riding in those charter boats. But again, you don't want the embarrassment of losing that fish of a lifetime to poor maintenance. All right, let's stop here, Dick, and everybody's kind of getting on there. Let's answer any questions that may be out there. I know I'm not doing that good a job that there's no questions.
I have a question for you. So I think over time I've learned that I typically just buy like major brand reels because I'm really reticent to buy anything that doesn't have a good service history or the availability of parts. Sometimes it may be cheaper, at the onset, but from my point of view now, I realize that having, a real manufacturer with parts availability for a long, long time means a lot. What do you think about that?
Question? Yeah,
What do you
okay.
think about the name brand versus
Sure. Well, good question. So there's a lot of things that that I've learned over time, right? Everybody doesn't need the Van Staal reel, right? Everybody doesn't need the pricey fashion industry one, whatever it is being promoted of the day. There's different strokes for different folks, to go back a long way, right? So there's kind of a saying, nobody ever gets in trouble for buying a Daiwa, buying a Shimano, or buying a pen, right? Or an Abu, for that matter, depending on what your needs are. And the reason for that is that there's generally good parts support, and there's generally good repair services. When you if that's important to you, then that's certainly something to consider. We're in a disposable society. There's no question about it. Manufacturers are making low-end reels, and it's the same with Penn and Shimano and Daiwa, right? You can buy a Daiwa Crossfire for $19. You can buy a Penn Wrath for $30. You can buy a Shimano FX for $19. Those probably aren't going to get repaired, right? If they break, they're gone. But when you think of who should be using them, they're probably the folks that are going to fish it, I don't know, once a month, twice a month, maybe. So figure 10 to 15 times a year on the upside. Those reels, if you maintain and kind of do what we're going to do, they're going to be fine. If you're going to fish them every day, you're going to run into trouble, and you want to consider something more appropriate for your needs. If you're going to go 20, 30, 40 times a year, yeah, you're going to want the one with the halcyon gears, or at least the marine quality gears versus the pressed pot metal, right? You're going to want the ones with the Carbon Tex drag washers as opposed to felt or Teflon washers, right? But don't be fooled by the name brands, because there are tiers within the products that they offer, and you can be just as disappointed with a Penn or a Daiwa or a Shimano as you can with the second tier. One of the things that's very interesting that, well, I think people like Dick realize, and people who follow the industry realize, we're getting to the point now where there's only about 4 or 5 major manufacturers out there, and there's probably about 7 plants in China that make most of the reels. So even though you think you're buying a name brand or you're not buying a name brand, well, you're probably buying the same reel, just relabeled or something along that lines. And here's the example: the biggest culprit, if you will, if there's blame to be had with that, is a company called Pure Fishing. I don't know if it resonates with anybody, but Pure Fishing owns about 12 brands right now. It owns Penn, Abu, Fluger, Shakespeare, Finor, Van Staal, Berkeley, and it goes on and on. What was the latest one? Fenwick Rods, 2 or 3 others in there. You have that, and then you have a company, Rather Products, and that's Zebco and Quantum and Johnson and Lose Reels and I don't know, whatever it is. But a lot of times we walk into a store like Dick's or a local tackle shop and you see a whole array of fishing reels out there and you think you've got all these choices. Well, you really don't have a lot of choices because it's like that Maytag Kenmore washer kind of thing, right? It's got a different cover on it, but they're using the same plants, same manufacturers and the like. So do your research, I think, to answer your question, Dick. It's you want to find out what the components are. You know, we're in a good world today. Feedback is all over the place, right? Some of it is actually true, but even in forums like this, where you talk to the folks on the dock, the folks when and you surf fishing, the folks on the boat, you can get an understanding of how they're using the reels, what reels they like, why they like them, and you should use that to a certain weight when you're considering what else you're buying. There's professional opinions out there. Everybody's got an opinion, right? I see too many articles out there that I read in some of these forums. Best 10 reels to buy, and every one of them is a Chinese reel for $17 on Amazon with a link that you can go to buy them, right? So be a little bit cautious, use your own experience, define what your needs are. And then to your earlier question, Dick, you probably won't go wrong with that one that's shown up there, the Daiwa Saltist. You won't go wrong with a Penn Spin Fisher or Fathom or Squall. You won't go wrong with, the Daiwa BG series or the Lexa, anything like that. It's when you start getting into some of those $30, $40, $50 type reels that you might be looking at that you really do need to understand. Do I have the parts support? Do I have the support from a repair center? For the longest time, it's funny, but if you go on the Zebco website, Zebco will tell you that they have no support for their reels. They have a warranty period. The warranty period is a year. If the reel fails, it's subject to repair or replacement. It's never repaired. It's always replaced. And that's just part of their strategy. They take price out of the cost of the reel by not putting in that infrastructure that's needed to support a repaired product. And, I've had, we can go on forever. I've had conversations with folks that told me the greatest reel they ever had, was a Shakespeare Alpha, right? Not a bad reel. They bought it 15 years ago. It's still fishing. And then you start to ask them, well, how many times you go fishing? Oh, I go once or twice a year. Or I get the person that says, this reel was really good. It lasted me 6 years. And you say, well, how many times did you take it fishing? About 4 times a year. Oh, good. In 24 trips, it broke. But to them, it was a great reel, right? So, back to this thing, everybody's got an opinion. Yeah, weigh that with everything else that you need. But again, you can't go wrong with Abu or Penn or Daiwa or Shimano and the like. So ask your friends, not the salesperson, when you're interested in purchasing something else. Other questions? Oh, come on, we must have another question out there. Okay. All right, Dick. So the second part, for those of you that are interested in actually taking your reel apart and seeing what's going on underneath it, and maybe you're into repairing it, maybe you want to have some fun. This was good during COVID when people were locked inside and trying to figure out what to do. All of a sudden, people decided they were going to start taking their fishing reels apart. And if you go on my channel every now and then, you'll see one called Reel in a Bag projects. And people took them apart, which was easy. Putting it back together again wasn't so easy.
I got a quick question for you on the salt removal products like Salt Away.
Yes.
Can you really spray that on your reels and just leave it? Just wipe it off?
I don't recommend. Yeah. I'm sorry. So finish your question, please.
Yeah. I mean, can you really spray that stuff on your tackle and just leave it without rinsing it off?
Yeah, I don't recommend leaving anything sprayed on your tackle. I always recommend flushing it with fresh water afterwards. For a long time, a lot of folks were saying, WD-40, right? The WD and WD-40 is water displacement, right? They were saying after you rinse your reels off, go ahead and spray the WD-40 on it and leave it on there. Well, I was finding that when they were doing that, it was eroding the greases inside the reels because it is a detergent to some extent. It was
Mhm.
also having an effect on the line, and the line started becoming very oily. And I don't know if that has an effect actually when you're fishing, but I can't imagine wanting to drop 200 yards of line that's got oil on it and trying to attract a fish. It may not, but I always recommend flushing and salt away, or any of the other ones. If you do it in vinegar, you probably want to flush that just because it's got a reek to it at the end of it. But no, I don't leave anything on the reels that wasn't intended to be there, other than greases and oils when I'm done.
Is that
Yeah.
Penn rod and reel cleaner? Is that the same thing? Is that the same chemical as salt away?
Not a chemist, don't know, but that does have a certain wax in it. So when I do use that as a rod and reel cleaner, if I'm using it as a cleaner, I'm going to spray that on my rod and reels. I primarily use it as a cleaner on the rods because you'll get that film, you'll get the scales on there from the fish and the like. And I'll put it on a little kitchen scrubby, like a Scotch Brite pad. And actually, I like the ones from the dollar store. They're not as rough as the Scotch ones. The Scotch ones are a little bit more abrasive. But I'll put it on there and I'll wipe it down. And then I'll always take a dry cloth, whether it's a paper towel or a microfiber cloth or whatever. I'll wipe off the excess on that. On the reel, I'll spray the outside. I'll deal with the cross posts and the side plates and the reel seat with that. I don't use rod and reel cleaner inside the reel. And again, the same idea. I'll put it on and then I'll let it sit for just a little bit, and always wipe it down before I go and return that reel to a customer. I don't leave it lay there. I don't know if there's a particular issue or damage with it. And Dick, I know you're talking about, possibly finding other speakers to do these types of forums. I think if you contact Penn, there's a regional rep that would probably be happy to have a conversation with you. We've had them up. I belong to two fishing clubs up in the North Jersey area here. One's the Hudson River Fishermen's Association. The other's Saltwater Anglers of Bergen County. And in both of those cases, they've had reps from Penn come out. They've had reps from Diowa. And they've had reps from the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection. They've had party boat captains come that are all too happy to tell you latest techniques and the like. They've had who's the guy down in Point Pleasant? You folks would probably know, Nick Onefsky, maybe, is there something like that? He came and talked about
yeah.
Hanashevsky, whatever. He came and talked one time about fishing off of whatever boat it is that he fishes in Point Pleasant, going out to the canyons and the like. And so there's a lot of folks that are willing to share, just like I am, some of their experiences. And depending on where your forum wants to take that, you can certainly get in touch with them. But I know Penn does have a traveling rep that is more than happy to talk to you, and he could answer those questions a little bit better than I could for that. Okay. So
this might be a little bit of a difficult question to answer, but like, what's kind of the minimum that you would recommend taking? Obviously, if there's not if there's an internal problem, if you got some sort of a noise with the gear, then you'd obviously have to go a little bit further. But for cleaning and greasing, what's kind of minimum to do? Because this looks pretty scary. You take that, you take
it is
that
kind of
plate
scary
off on the right, and there's like 18 parts that come shooting out at you.
But
At
once
least.
you see
Sure.
Dennis's videos, the fear tends to go somewhat.
Well, that's one of the reasons why I did it, because you can actually show people how to do it yourself, right? Very good question. It's not for everybody, right? So here's the answer in the short term. If you have a conventional reel, it's usually not too hard to get the side plate off without it exploding on you. But just you might want to check. Well, I'm showing a schematic up there. Probably don't want to take it off the saltest, right? But the ones that you can't take it off of easily usually have a spool adjuster inside of it. And they also have an oil and a grease cap in the handle. I think at a minimum, if you keep them clean, you can get to two of the major pieces there. If you take the oil nut off of the handle or the handle nut, there's generally a cylinder under there that'll accept a couple of drops of oil. That's going to keep the handle running smooth on the bridge post. That's cool. And then if you have the spool adjuster behind the handle, if you take that off and put a little bit of grease in there, that'll keep or use your oil if you don't want to buy the grease. Just do it more frequently. That'll keep the spool turning freely on that side. You can't get on this, like a Saltus, you can't get to the other side without removing the spool. But if you're working on something like a pen, which has two spool adjusters on it, one on each side, you can pull both of those, put a dab of grease into both of those collars, and that'll keep it running for a long time without scaring the wits out of you there with the repair.
Yeah,
But I
I
think
found the lever drag reels are a little bit simpler than some of the conventional, some of these star drag reels.
Thank you. Everybody gets scared with lever drags for some reason, maybe because it's a technology we didn't grow up with, but everybody gets scared with, oh my gosh, they must be so complicated. They're the most simple technology out there in the marketplace. It's wonderful. I love taking an Avette or an Accurate apart or any of those. It's just a couple of bearings and a little ramp to pull a spool and a pressure plate together, and it works. Yeah, and they're easily maintained. You can pull that one side plate off. It's generally self-contained, and if you can get that plate off, you can go oil the two bearings and deal with the main gear without even taking the main gear out to make that one work a whole lot easier, if you will, than some of these. Yeah, thanks for the question.
Now, the other thing, Tony, is that Dennis gets a lot of reel in a bag projects. So he has people who tried to do it, couldn't do it, but they put all the pieces in a bag, send it off to Dennis, and so that's a good backup plan if you really.
Yeah, I've been there, done that. I actually took it to once it was once it was in the bag, and I managed to find all the pieces that were on the floor. I took it to Tonnison's and Tony's Bait and Tackle in Manahawkin, and they actually fixed it, put it back together.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
they did a good job. But that I have not tried to disassemble a star drag reel since then.
Well, kudos to you for trying. So one of the things I started this for, as I mentioned, was kind of teaching people to do it themselves, and kind of an educational thing, which has always kind of been near and dear to me. So I make it a no penalty zone. I said, look, if you're going to try, failure is part of learning, right? If you're going to try and it doesn't work out, I'll be happy to accept that bag and try and help you get it back together again.
And when you put them back together, don't worry about those couple parts that are left over.
Yeah, that always makes me nervous when there's a few extras. Somebody sent me a reel in the bag project, and it had a couple of pieces that were automotive in it. And I started wondering, does this belong on the reel or not? Yeah. So yeah,
I have a question about drag washers, right?
Okay.
So I always make an effort to back off my drags when I'm storing my rods. Does that do anything for me?
Absolutely. That's a great practice. It's a best practice, and you should do that all the time. So just think of a vice clamp, if you will, right? When you've got that star drag bolted down tight, let's say you're at max drag on that star adjuster, what that's doing is it's giving you maximum drag when you're fighting a fish, but it's also compressing the drag washers. So if your drag washer is, well, the common ones would be like a Penn HT100. It's kind of a hybrid on a Carbon Tex, but a lot of them have leather washers, or they have some kind of composite washers. And most of those are porous, and most of those have grease on them when they come from the factory. When you go and you take excuse me, I snap for a minute. When you take a star adjuster and you clamp that down all the way, you're squeezing that grease out of the washer. And if you leave it for a prolonged period of time, let's say September to March, when you're out of the water, those greases can dry up on you. And the next thing you know is you have a drag washer that's frozen to the metal and is totally inoperable. So the best way or best practice around that is exactly what you're doing. Back your adjuster off whenever you're not using it. That goes for lever drags and star adjusters and just about any other kind of combination that's out there. Don't leave the drag engaged if you're not using the reel. Same thing with spinning wheels. That's the one that everybody overlooks, right? They think spinning wheels are set it and forget it, right? Just tighten it down and walk away from it. No, and as we talked about earlier, the spinning wheel is really the one that gets assaulted with the water and the debris and everything else that gets in that cup up top and kind of works its way through the channel that holds those drag washers. So yeah, you want to back them off when you're not using them.
Thank you.
What's the best place to find the schematics? Because some you know, I think, you know, when I had that reel in the bag situation, you know, I went to it was an Abu Garcia reel, and I went to their site, and they had a picture on the site, but it was, you know, it was this big, and there was 7,000 parts on it. So I couldn't determine what, you know, what went where. So is there a better place to find those things?
Yeah, good questions. And I think somewhere down the road here, we're going to have a chart. I don't know why I'm getting leg cramps, but I'm getting leg cramps. I apologize. The one of the best ones, I mean, the internet is a wonderful place, right? The one of the best ones is a site called realschematic.com. If you have a reel, let's say you have this guy, the Daiwa Saltist, right? Just put in Daiwa Saltist real schematic, and usually the first result in your internet search will be realschematic.com. And boy, they have them for just about everything. I don't know how they make any money. You get one little pop-up ad that shows there, but for the most part, you can find just about anything there. If you want the pen reel schematics, I always recommend the folks at mysticparts.com. That's Scott's Bait and Tackle down in Little Egg Harbor. For those of you that know Scott, great guy. They are an authorized pen distributor. On his site, you go to the first part that says pen parts, you'll have a selection there between spinning reels, conventional reels, and international reels. And just click on whatever is appropriate, follow the tag to what your reel is. And then there's a drop-down menu. It'll say order parts for it, reel schematic, and one that I love, which is reel specs. Because on my site, I get questions all the time. What was the year this reel was made? What's the line capacity? What's the max drag? Those kinds of things. And all those reel specs are right there, just as if you were reading the manual out of the box. One of the things that's very interesting with Scott and Mo and the folks down there as well is, if you have a question on the reel, they basically have every pen reel that was ever made. They keep one in their warehouse. And if you have a question like, I have a pen power graph, which is a rather odd reel, 2500, and I don't know what goes between the spool and the rotor, they will actually go to their that box, pick out that reel, open it up, and visually give you an inspection and a report back. Here's where it goes, or here's how it goes, just because they're going to help you out. So great folks.
What was the website again? Mr. Parts?
Mystic. It's Mystic Island down in outside of Atlantic City. Mystic, MYSTIC, parts.com.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
All right. So
if people say that a picture is worth 1,000 words, I think that one of Dennis's videos is worth about 1,000 pictures. So I think that
that's because I used 1,000 words.
the diagrams are good, but they're a little hard to interpret, you know. But the videos are so much clearer in terms of guiding you through how to do this.
Yeah, and that's kind of why I decided to do that as well. So, and in the age of the internet, it's wonderful. It gives folks like us a reason to do things, right? So, all right. Any other questions? Okay. Well, we'll soldier on then, Dick. And again, if this is running too long, let me know. We'll be happy to move on. Let's go back to the other one. You're getting one step ahead of yourself.
I'm sorry.
Go back to that other chart for a moment. Yeah. Okay. So common faults is that people find that there's a noise being made, and the first thing they do is put the put the reel on a table, a bench, a desk, whatever it is. They get out their tools and they start ripping it apart, trying to figure out what that problem is. I always recommend start with a plan, right? Plan your work and work your plan kind of thing. Get the schematic if you can. That'll at least tell you whether you want to open it up or not. I don't know your name, but whoever looked at the Saltus and said there's a lot of things that can go crazy in there. I don't want to do this. That's a good part of your plan right there, is open and get the schematic, find it, see if it's something that you think you're capable of handling. If you are, if that intimidates you, don't start, because there's a lot of things that even surprise me today as I take reels apart. I have a little bit more of a background to say I can anticipate when something is about to go wrong, or at least a recovery plan when something does. But if there's an intimidation factor there, don't be afraid to say, I don't want to do this, and can get it to somebody who does. Get the schematic and organize your workspace. I've come, Dick knows, some of my earlier videos were kind of wide panned, and now they're pretty much focused just on the reel that I'm working on. I have to admit, I'm a little bit embarrassed if I go to a wide pan these days, because my organization is chaos theory. It works for me. It doesn't work for everybody, but it's probably not the best practice in terms of how to work. Get your tools ready. If you see that the schematic there is going to require some wrenches or pliers or screwdrivers and the like, get them and keep them within reach. As you start working on a reel, the last thing you probably want to do with an open reel is put the reel down, walk away, try to find the right tool, and come back and forget where you were, right? Get the chemicals, your oils, greases, cleaners, and so on that you're going to use, organize them, keep them at hand. And I'm probably Scott's best customer. I keep lots of paper towels, and I said cotton swabs, but I really do use Q-tips, but I guess the Q-tip police would get me if I was using somebody else's thing, right? Cotton swabs, the scrubbies, latex gloves. I wear one on my hand that it's not my dominant hand. I like to keep the greases and junk off of my hand because I'm not quite sure what that is. And organize your parts. I use a parts tray, but there's a lot of different systems, right? The folks that are in the military, I find they like to take the parts off and line them up in the way that they took them off, so that they know when it's time to reassemble, just put it in a reverse order. Me, I just throw them all in the parts tray, but that's probably from experience, not from recommendation. Just have a way that you're going to be comfortable with in terms of the parts that come off, particularly the small pieces and parts. A lot of these reels have a lot of very small parts that my big hands can't handle. Just know where they are and know how to get to them and where they're going to be when it's time to reinstall. All right, Dick, you can flip that.
Okay, let's see if I can get this to flip here.
Okay, does your cursor need to be in that block or something? Oh, thank you. Boy, did you jump ahead. Okay. Now we're I think you have to go the other way. We're at the end of your slideshow. There we go. That's the one we want.
Okay.
All right. We're all learning from this. Are you going to go into presentation mode, or are we just going to leave it like that?
Oops, here we go.
Oh, you just jumped again.
Yeah, I didn't even touch it that time.
Okay, slide 9 is what we want.
Slide. Okay, we're wrong way. There we go.
Okay.
It's slide 9.
Okay. Did you want to bring that full screen, or do you want to just work off of it like this?
I think that's okay as is. Otherwise, I'm going to screw it
Okay,
up.
cool. So here's what you can see when my desk actually looked clean. It doesn't quite look like that anymore, but I've got camera setups and lights and other things there that kind of get in the way. So let's just take a look from right to left then. That first thing is a braid cutter. And I get a lot of snarls and tangles and things from folks that send in reels with line on it. So that's generally what that one is there for. That next one, if you work on a lot of reels, is a wonderful tool. It's Alan Tanny's pen wrench. The pen wrench also works on Daiwa and works on some Shimano handle nuts. That's about 2 inches longer than the standard pen wrench that comes in a box. It's about 1/4 of an inch thicker. So it makes taking off those pieces nice and easy. Needle nose pliers, that's always good for little clips like E-clips that are held on posts. And then a Phillips head and a regular flat-bladed screwdriver. In the middle there is some kind of a pen reel. I think it's probably a Penn Spin Fisher 5, just doing its job, kind of showing you that it is going to get serviced. A flashlight on the left, boy, that's old school. I think I've replaced that one with one of those high intensity ones. That's, believe it or not, for looking for the parts that are on the floor. Yeah, they do fall on the floor too. It's also for close inspection. In the back, there's the bottom of a milk jug that serves as my parts tray, and a whole bunch of wrenches, right? Most all of those wrenches are metric wrenches. That's kind of where the industry has gone now. If you're working on an older classic one, Dick just sent me an old Shakespeare reel that actually had the US, what is it, SAE threads or whatever on it. But for the most part, any nut that you're going to take off of a reel today is probably going to be a metric thread. Off to the side there on that back corner there is a Reel X oiler. Reel X is an aftermarket oil for fishing reels. And I say it a lot in my videos. I'll say it here. I don't care what oil or grease you use on what reel. Just make sure it's a fishing reel oil or grease. I found Vaseline. I find axle grease. I find the worst one of all is a lithium spray grease that you would use on hinges or doors of cars. Some people think that it's nice to just take the side plate off and spray the internals with that. I've never seen anything gum up a reel more than lithium spray. So just use a fishing reel grease. It'll give you the maximum protection and the longest longevity, I guess, of any of the greases that you could apply there. And yes, you can use Vaseline in a reel. It is a petroleum jelly, but it's just not going to hold up very well. It's good for diapers and diaper rash, but I would keep it out of the fishing reels for now. All right, you can flip that thing.
Okay. Let's see.
Or click on 10, I guess.
Oops. There we
Okay,
go.
let's
Worked.
okay. So this is the tips. Relax. One of the first things that somebody ever told me about reel repairs, they said, you need to know two things. And one of them, what is it? You have to have a basic knowledge of mechanics. And more importantly, you need a sense of humor. You need to have the ability to laugh at yourself, because it's going to happen. You're going to repair something that's just not going to work right. And instead of getting frustrated, just going to have to laugh at it and use it as a learning point. I have a lot of things on my website. I call them tuition reels. I go to a flea market or something, I'll buy a reel for $5 that's broken. And the only thing I ever want to do with that reel is take it apart and find out why it broke. It's a learning experience. It's a tuition you pay to learn a little bit more. I now understand that when I say take pictures, I can't say digital cameras or phones or anything anymore. I now need to say image capture device. That's now the buzzword, image capture. So take pictures from your image capture device, if you will. Use that schematic. Keep your area clean, particularly the floor under your feet, because things tend to roll off desks and find their way onto the floor. When you're working on something, work in the sections of the reel. We were just talking about lever drags. Lever drags have two primary sections to it. It has a spool. Inside that spool, it's going to have a pressure plate and a drag and a series of bearings. And then it's going to have, on the outer case, it's going to have the gear drive and the lever drive. There's no sense when you're working on a lever drag reel to take every piece and part off of that reel before you decide to work on it. Work on the spool first or the gear side first, doesn't matter, whatever is your preference. Complete that work and then go to the other one. It minimizes the number of pieces and parts that are on your table, and it also gives you a feeling of an accomplishment, and is also a logical stop point. So if it's getting late or you're getting tired or you're losing your focus and you've just finished the spool, you can walk away from it and do the gear side the next day. You really don't, or come back an hour later or go have a cup of coffee or do something. So just work on the sections. It works better that way. And that's what I have here. On the spinning side, work on the gear case, and then deal with the rotor and the spool and drags another time. It's a good way to do that. And then expect the unexpected, right? Springs go boing, parts falls. Screws break, memories fail. Yeah, it's part of being human. Things will happen. And while you're on this call, use my forum, go sign up for a subscription, be a subscriber, it would really be appreciated on my site, and just leave a question in the comment section. Or if Dick circulates this thing on the front end of this thing, here's my contact information. Drop me a line. Give me a calling is tough. I do have a phone number on there, but if I'm working on the reel, if I'm doing a video, if I'm out for the day, whatever it is, I can't return the phone call. But generally speaking, if you leave me an email the next day, I do get to them first thing in the morning. Same thing with the comments that are left on the videos and the YouTube. I do try to do that thing before I start working on reels, and I try to be responsive. The folks in the who have signed up and subscribed to the channel have been fantastic, and I like to think that this is a small part that I can repay them with, answering them a question if they've had one because they started. To that point, where are all those wonderful things, right? Manufacturers' websites, don't be afraid to go to them. There's an awful lot of good information on the manufacturers' websites. Shimano and Okuma will fulfill parts directly. So if you have a problem with a Shimano reel or an Okuma reel, you can call them. I think they're both out in California. I know they're both out in California. Where they are in California, I've forgotten, but they're both out there. You have the conglomerates, you have Pure Fishing. We talked about that. I didn't mention Mitchell. Yeah, they own Mitchell too. It used to be WC Bradley, but they just sold off. So Quantum and Zebco went to Rather Company, which was Lew's fishing reels, and Finor and Van Stahl were sold to Pure Fishing. So this chart's a little bit aged. I need to update that. Here's Mystic Parts, if you will. There's a Mike's Repair, Reel Repair. That's a great site. They're in Vancouver, Canada, but every now and then they have these hard to find parts just because. There's a company out there called E-Replacement Parts. They sell everything from washing machine and lawnmower parts to reel parts. You can't find all of the manufacturers on that site, but it is a relatively good fulfillment source. And I'll give you another one. It's Dave's Reel Repair. They're down in Tampa, Florida. Sometimes they're known as Platinum Parts, and they are very super responsive. They're great folks to deal with, just like the folks at Mystic Parts. So if I was to say that there's two vendors that I would use, it's Mystic Parts for pen. It's Platinum Parts in Tampa for non-pen. And there's also one in Dallas called southwesternparts.com. They're good, but you do need to find the part numbers in order to get those things correct. On the forums, well, my site, my YouTube channel has been a great forum. If you're interested in Mitchell reels as old reels, there's a forum out there on mitchellreelsmuseum.com. Alan Tanney runs a good site. If you're interested in vintage or collectible reels, I belong to a group called ORCA. It's Old Reel Collectors Association. I don't know if that means that the reel collectors are old or if they're talking about old reels.
I think it's both, Dennis.
That's both. It may be. You know, we chase back to the reels we couldn't afford when we were kids, right? So, we're out running around, buying the pen greenies because we couldn't have a pen greenie when we were a kid, right? They're outstanding, absolutely outstanding. And what's nice about them is they have a forum on there with all the schematics for the old reels. So if you're trying to figure out, where do I find a schematic for a Damn Quick that was made in West Germany in the 1970s? Where do I find a schematic for a South Bend bait casting reel, right? You can find it there. And a whole bunch of obscure collectible reels, the New York ball reels or the Kentucky reels. They got more stuff there than you would ever care to learn, but it's all there if you care to as well. So those are great resources as well. And I'm always finding them on the internet as well. That's my phone number below there. And that's my email address. So if you have questions or if you have any thing that's urgent that you want to try calling me on, chances are you're going to leave a voicemail, but I will try to give you respond to your voicemail. And again, that secondchancetackle@gmail.com is the best way to get me. I will answer those definitely by the following morning, generally over a cup of coffee. So I think that's it now, isn't it, Dick?
That's good. That's good. I must admit, so when I got into this myself, I would never have started taking reels apart if it hadn't been for Dennis's videos. But having done that, and the first couple you do, you're a little nervous, and you get to some difficult little parts, but just sort of like you say, calmly and with a sense of humor, getting through it. And it's nice to always have that the issue in mind that if I really totally can't do it, I can put it in the bag and send it to you, so it ends up not a disaster. But it's
Somebody,
fun. I think it's been great fun, and again, for me, like in the fall and the winter when there's not that much else to do, to spend that time going through all these reels has been really great.
sure. And you don't have to turn it into a business or anything, just working on your own reels. It's, I know that I got started with this because I discovered I had a mechanical ability in taking Volkswagen engines apart back in the day. And I've always found that I like to tinker, and one day, one of my reels didn't work. I took it to a tackle shop to have it repaired. The guy told me it wasn't worth fixing. The parts and the labor were going to outweigh the value of the reel. I took it home, I took it apart, and I ordered the piece, and well, the rest, as they say, is history, right? So,
Yes.
so there you go. So yeah,
I think
well,
most
Dick, I hope that this has been kind of what you were looking for or hoping for. I do appreciate everybody who's remained on for the call, and I thank you for the invite.
So I think we're going to try to get this posted on the Salt Strong website, and I think that I'll send a copy of this to Dennis, and it may end up on his website as well. So we'll see where all that goes. But Dennis, thank you so much. This was so kind of you to do this for us, and again, as I told you earlier today, you have given me immense amount of enjoyment and hours and hours and hours of just watching his videos, which I really find to be a whole lot of fun. So thank you for all that.
You're certainly welcome. I wish everybody tight lines and great fishing.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks,
Take care.
Dennis. Thanks, Dick.
Thank you, Dennis. Thanks, Dick. It was great. Thank you.